This is my first personal podcast episode in 1 year. So, Happy New Year, guys. Happy 2025. Period. I think we can pretty much know we're going to be in for a wild ride, unless God has other plans. Period. The guy that was, I guess, elected president is pretty disgusting. And that's kind of a euphemistic way of stating it. But I'm not going to dwell on that. Just kind of want to bring you up to date on me. It's been a little over 2 years now when gosh, I hate to say this because it sounds so dark. When I attempted to leave the planet, some people would say attempted suicide. And it was unsuccessful. It was almost comical. And I did it with sleeping pills. So I guess it's possible that it can be successful, but it wasn't for me. And interestingly, I really wasn't depressed when I did it. I just knew that this was the day that I was going to exit. And probably has a lot to do with my OCD. But I've always been an actor. I've done theater. I've been a country singer. You know all of that from listening to the podcast. But after I retired during COVID, because I just hated teaching at that point, and for years had no time to really pursue my art. And I also had chosen to raise a granddaughter, which is no doubt the best thing I've ever done. So after I retired, I spent 2 years busting my ass, taking every class I hadn't taken, including improv, auditioning a lot, doing everything I could. And I guess the word is naive enough to think that after 2 years of busting my ass every day, and that includes Saturday and Sunday, that I would at least be able to make as much as a working actor as I was making in my teaching job. Although I wasn't actually teaching, I was, as a special educator, writing their IEP documents, testing them, presenting at meetings, etc. But I just thought that I'd worked really, 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 really hard and kind of half-assed for a lifetime, but definitely those last 2 years. And I was basically out of money, and I didn't want to do anything else but the art, and I was selfish. I think people who attempt suicide are very selfish. I wanted to get out of the discomfort, the depression, the I guess, disappointment, but I just didn't want to do anything else. And I had not been able to make a living at acting yet. And, I had done indie films, but that wasn't enough. And also, I want to turn this autobiographical podcast into a limited miniseries. I have had a very, as you know, if you've listened to my podcast, exciting, sometimes dangerous, never dull life. And gosh, now I'm 74. I also have to mention that now I have this, which I probably mentioned her before because she's 3 now, this absolutely divine great-granddaughter, Oakley, who brings utter joy into my life, as does her mother. And I also like sports a lot, especially football. A little bit of college, but definitely the NFL. And, I like all sports when it gets to the championship level. I just totally got off on the Dodgers winning the World Series in 2024. And I'm still pissed that they didn't keep Walker Buehler, who really saved their ass and to a large degree is responsible for our winning the World Series. Okay, enough on that. But since I've talked to you within the year, had to do something. So I continued to audition, do my indie films, and work again. Thank you, Jesus. Didn't have to be in the classroom, just had to test students one-on-one for special education, write their legal documents, and present them at a meeting because a special education student has a meeting at least once a year, if not more so. And so that's what I'd been doing. And I was invited back to do that after retirement. And although it wasn't, well, teachers don't make any money anyway, not even in California where they probably get paid the best, unless maybe in New York. But I wasn't making the money that I was making when I was doing it full time, but it was decent money. And I could take off to audition whenever I needed to. And it lasted a good 2 years. 2 years seems to be a big thing in my life. And then suddenly, my position as a certified contracted consultant was brought to a close. And everything I was doing, which was everything, regarding the independent education plans or IEPs of our special education students, was handed back to the special ed teachers to do. And I don't know how they're going to do with that, but I guess I wish them well. So I've never been one to really save money. I have to invest in myself, and it can be tricky sometimes. So I was left with, this past month, I've been left with the position of, wow, I guess I'm going to have to substitute teach. Now that brings me to where I am now. I am working at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall School, which is the largest group of accused juvenile offenders, probably in the state, and certainly it represents Los Angeles County. When I first started teaching at Los Padrinos, before I retired for, years, I even had a co-ed class. So we had, I'm going to refer to them as children. We had girls and boys. And for some reason, in special education, they had co-ed classes. And I had the girls and the boys, which now, today, would be an impossibility. But then it was doable with the right teacher, which would have been me. And I really liked it a lot. We had probation guards who were pretty much in control of the minors or students. And being a teacher, a special ed teacher, we still had special day classes in for all special ed students. We managed quite nicely. I had a paraeducator who was my assistant. Now, Los Padrinos closed. There were some problems. I'm sure we didn't have perfect probation officers. I'm sure there were some bad ones, but there were also many, many good ones. The students were pretty much well behaved when they went from their housing units to the school area. They had their hands behind their backs, not because they were handcuffed, but just so that they wouldn't throw gang signs and get into fights on the way to school. Then they closed Los Padrinos for, I guess, a variety of reasons. Probably, it seems to always come down to probation. What probation is not doing, what they did do that they shouldn't have done, the guards, and working for my school district, we are actually guests of them. We do the teaching, but they take care of the youth 24/7. So there were problems. So they closed Los Padrinos. Now, 5 or 6 years later, they've reopened it. Something has happened. Many things have happened. I think for one thing, right now, we don't have nearly as many students. I can remember when Los Padrinos had almost 800 students. Now we may have 300. But we do have what I'm going to call the hardcore students, minors. We no longer have kids that steal cell phones. We have students that are accused of big, sometimes bad crimes. I'm not sure they're guilty at all, but we're talking, rape, murder, certainly theft, big time theft, a lot of serious crimes. So those are the students that we have now. And they can range in age. I mean, I've had an 11-year-old, but essentially it's like 15 to 18. We also have at Los Padrinos now not just the regular school population, but we have something called the compound, which is where the students are who are facing the big adult crimes, and they are being adjudicated. They are not acquitted or found guilty yet, and they may be there for a long time because their trials are big. And then they are what is called fighting their fitness. They're trying to stay as juveniles, even though they may have been accused of committing adult crimes. And if they're found guilty, they would then go to what is called youth prison, because what Los Padrinos is just juvenile jail. It's not prison. So if they're found guilty, they'll go to, usually they don't go directly to state prison. Usually they go to youth prison, and they can remain there, I think, for 4 or 5 years. And if they have any additional time that they need to be incarcerated, they'll go on to state prison. So right now at Los Padrinos, we have the compound in which those students are kept completely isolated from the rest of the student population. What I want to get at here, and then I'm going to move on. But right now, sad to say, the inmates are running the asylum. The Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, perhaps influenced by maybe the governor, maybe the child's advocacy group. I'm sure all of this was, at least I think I'm sure all of this was well-intentioned. They wanted a more therapeutic setting for these students, even though these are the hardcore students. So what has happened is that they have changed or taken away a lot of the tools that probation had to keep the students in line. Again, at this point, I have to say, I'm sure there are some bad probation officers that would take advantage of this, but I think for the most part, they're good. They just have no tools to work with. They took away their pepper spray for a long time. And when there is a riot in a classroom or outside of a classroom, you have to have some way to bring the altercation to a halt. And so things with probation are not good at all. I would say the morale of probation is probably a -50, just from the folks I've talked to. And the probation and the teachers, it has to be a partnership. It's not a great partnership now because probation's not happy. And I can certainly understand why teachers aren't happy. In the good old days, the students might get into fights with each other, usually gang-related, but they would never assault a probation officer, a guard, and teachers were completely off-limit. Today, anyone can be assaulted. Instead of the students orderly coming to school from their units, they are brought to their classroom by probation, and sometimes they just look like a herd of wild cattle going into their classroom, and sometimes the wrong classroom. And there doesn't seem to be really any consequences for bad, and I mean really bad behavior sometimes, that I would call sexual harassment, even sexual assault, property damage regularly. Windows are broken, light fixtures are broken, and usually the students are not even suspended from class. There is a guard or probation officer in every classroom, if for no other reason than to just keep the door shut so the kid doesn't try to run out and get into a fight with another kid he might see out the window. But we do have probation officers that are, I call them the ones that are dressed in black, who, if there's a real problem, they can come into the classroom and should remove the student. That doesn't even always happen that way. And the district I work for, also now the general ed teacher is in there with the special ed teacher. There are no more special ed classes. They're all mixed in together. So there's a special ed teacher and a general ed teacher in each class. And right now I'm subbing as a special ed teacher. And frankly, sometimes it can be traumatic. These students are generally very impolite. I've had books thrown at me, and I consider myself very lucky. It's just not a good thing, and probation doesn't or cannot do much about it. And what I was about to say about the school district is that they don't like to suspend students. I guess that's part of not providing a therapeutic setting. And of course, we have school psychologists, and they have the mental health, which is part of probation, that can work with the students, but it's just not working. It's every day is pretty traumatic if you are a teacher in the classroom, and probably if you're a probation officer. They've been threatening to close Los Padrinos again. I don't think they know what to do with these students, where they would go. There are advocates that just want them to let them all go. Probation, I know for the last 5 years, at least some of them have wanted to get trained on this new therapeutic approach because it truly isn't working. Right now, the students have no consequences to speak of, and that's not life. We're really not helping them. You'll hear about the school to prison pipeline, and a lot of times that's what this looks like. Once these students, and it's not all of the students, there are some jewels, there are some diamonds that are there at the school and shouldn't be there, and probably will only be there once. But the problem is, if they do come back, they end up, whether they like it or not, almost becoming part of the system, and it really changes them. When you look at the files of these students, I would say every student at Los Padrinos has PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, either from family problems, lack of family, drugs, gangs, again, sexual assault, even being injured themselves in another, either with a gun or with a knife or another way. So it's just not a good place right now. And it's frankly dangerous for the students, for the teachers, for the probation officers. And I pray that it gets better. Probation has been given chances to change it, so they will try to hire new people. And I've seen them hire a lot of new people. And you have to have a degree to work, like a police officer, to work as juvenile guard or a probation officer. But these people come in after they're trained. They'll usually stay about a day or a week, and then they just won't come back because it's not a controlled environment. And if they can get a position, maybe more money somewhere else, why wouldn't they? So enough of that. But let's just say that I have witnessed a teacher that I work with being sexually harassed. I would even call it assault. And although I didn't witness this, a friend of mine who had a class in the compound, and this is really probation's fault. I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but when the students are taken out of the classroom at the end of the day, they have their, in the compound, they have their living units in the same building. And probation is supposed to wait until every student leaves the classroom. Um, and this probation officer didn't. One student was left, and it was the wrong student, and he simply locked the door so that he could be alone with the teacher in the classroom. This teacher was, I'd say, early 40s, attractive, great teacher, and was assaulted. And now that student is in county, and I actually knew the student. I knew him from another site, and he was pretty slick, and I guess he thought he could get away with that. I can't even imagine, but he didn't. So anyway, it's not a safe place to work now. And as sad as it is for probation, the guards, and the teachers, it's really the saddest for the students because whether we think we're trying or not, they're not being helped. They, you know, they like to come to school. I think it kind of gets their mind off their cases that they're fighting in court. And so that's a challenge for them. But they have no consequences, and so they're not learning very much, even though we have some good teachers there. And gosh, I appreciate your prayers because these students deserve better, and the teachers deserve better, and the probation officers deserve better. There was a new district attorney elected, and supposedly he's going to change some things. Let's see. The Department of Justice visits our campus quite often, but I'd like to see some state officials, the governor, the DA. I'd like to see some of these people there and see what is going on and come to some really good solution for Los Padrinos, because it doesn't do any good to close the facility and move the kids somewhere else, because you're just, right now, you're just taking the problems with you. So enough of that. But fortunately for me, I am going to be leaving Los Padrinos and moving to something called LACSA, the School of Performing Arts, which my district also has. And I will be doing the same thing that I was doing before and making more money too, which is always helpful. But I'll be testing and writing and presenting the IEPs of the students that need it at LACSA. It's the School of Performing Arts, so we're going to have probably some wealthy parents, certainly some celebrity parents, and that can come with its own set of problems. But I'm really happy about it. It's a longer commute for me because it is at Cal State Los Angeles, and I live in Redondo Beach. But the salary's better, and the students will certainly be more well behaved. So it's a different scene altogether. I would like to say also that enough of that, but I've really been suffering from depression and anxiety. Right now, it's mostly depression, I think, because um, having to pretty much start all over again after that um, suicide attempt, which is, I won't ever do that again. I had a talk with God, actually before and after, and no matter what, I won't ever do that again. I have some wonderful friends that have helped me, um, some wonderful family, and I have God. And but the depression, I think, stems from the fact that I'm now making less money. Uh, my rent has now been raised. Um, been living in the same place for, gosh, 25 years, more. My landlord, who has been a really good friend of mine, now has dementia. His two daughters have taken over. It's become a trust. And so I feel crunched financially right now, which is depressing. Um, the acting isn't happening yet the way I want it to. And I'm good. I'm really quite good. Um, so I've just started this new antidepressant, and I'm hopeful. But no matter how bad it gets, I am here to the end. And what I want to do is make my living as a working actor so that I can eventually fund, the sooner the better, my podcast um, into TV format. Um, I am in the process of turning the podcast episodes into treatments, because producers and networks and everything, they want to see something in writing. I thought that just juicy parts of the podcast would be enough, but no, they really want to see, um, they want to see a screenplay or a treatment or even a book, and I definitely didn't want to write a book. Um, so I guess that kind of brings you up to date on me right now. I am anxious about this next 4 years, um, with the election the way it turned out. But I'm also very grateful. Um, believe it or not, I'd like to remarry. I'd like to remarry someone wonderful. It would be nice to have a mate. Um, because sometimes I feel quite alone, end up having to do everything myself, which I don't mind at all. But when you don't have the funds to do it, it can be depressing or even anxiety provoking. Um, I want to be a better person, a kinder person, certainly a more grateful person. Um, I want to be a more forgiving person. I don't want to take anything personally. Don't want to make assumptions. Always do my best. And I'm taking that from um, Don Miguel Ruiz's The Four Agreements, which is wonderful. Um, but anyway, Happy New Year to everyone. I have much, much to be grateful for. And talk soon.